I'm here to present the Frances Perkins Award and introduce our recipients. The board's Frances Perkins Award is presented to people or organizations who have served the system with distinction, embody the Frances Perkins spirit, and have made a positive impact on the workers' comp system for the betterment of all New Yorkers. As many in this room know, workers' rights advocate Frances Perkins fought for labor and social reforms after witnessing the devastating Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in New York City in 1911. Her tenacious spirit and forceful belief in worker safety led to her becoming not only the first woman to serve as commissioner in 1918 and later serve as chair from 1926 to 1929, but also the first woman to be named to a presidential cabinet position as the fourth United States Secretary of Labor under President Roosevelt in 1933. She was a champion of workplace inspection laws, minimum wage requirements, reduced work weeks, and unemployment insurance. The fire claimed the lives of 123 women and 23 men, who were mostly Italian and Jewish immigrants, ages between 14 and 23. As the daughter of an immigrant myself, who was also a seamstress in New York City until she retired, I can't help but draw parallels to my life and think how at a different time, this could have been my mother. In fact, this could have also been me and my younger brother as well, as there was this one summer where he and I both worked at a clothing factory in Long Island City called Metro Stitch, where we were barely making minimum wage, and most of the workers there worked piecemeal on garments. But we were lucky. Neither one of us were hurt on that job. And we had protections in the workplace that did not exist at the time of the Triangle Fire. Because in the aftermath of the tragedy, the New York Factory Investigation Commission was created, leading to 60 new laws in New York State to progressively modernize labor laws and the state's fire and safety codes, and the amendment of the New York State Constitution, effective January 1, 1914, to allow for a law on compulsory workers' compensation. The Workers' Compensation Board, along with the State Department of Labor and the New York State Insurance Fund, were all forged from the tragic fire and proudly carry on the Frances Perkins spirit today. As such, it is my honor to introduce the recipient of this year's Frances Perkins Award, the Remember the Triangle Fire Coalition. A round of applause, please. The coalition educates the public about the 1911 Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire through ongoing arts projects and educational outreach, and works with labor organizations, first responders, universities, and community groups to implement annual remembrance activities and programming to raise awareness of the fire and explore continuing relevance to workers' rights and workplace safety, a conversation that I'm happy to have had already with a number of you today, prevention. The organization is also made up of the descendants of victims. For more than a decade, led the effort to build a permanent art memorial to honor those victims and the legacy of the fire. Last year, that dream came to fruition, and I was fortunate to attend the inauguration and the beautiful memorial in New York City, along with many of my colleagues in government and the governor herself. As Spanish philosopher George Santayana once wrote, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." Through their efforts in holding and participating in remembrance events, by creating a stunning and permanent visual monument, and with their ongoing social media and outreach honoring the legacy of the 146 souls lost on that tragic day, the Remember the Triangle Fire Coalition is helping us all remember the past so that we do not repeat it. Mary Ann and esteemed board members of the Remember the Triangle Fire Coalition, some of whom are in this room today. Your work is helping employers understand the importance of safety measures. It is helping workers understand critical protections and rights and why they are needed. Your work is preventing future accidents and helping New Yorkers go home to their loved ones at the end of their workdays. New Yorkers, and indeed all humans, need and deserve safe workplaces. Here to accept the award on behalf of the Remember the Triangle Fire Coalition is Board President Mary Ann Trasiati. Before she joins me up here, a little bit about her. Mary Ann has helped organize the annual official Triangle Fire commemoration since 2010. Leading the project to build the Triangle Fire Memorial that was dedicated last year. It is the first labor memorial and one of only a handful of memorials to women in New York City. In addition to her work at Remember the Triangle Fire Coalition, Mary Ann is a professor of rhetoric and public advocacy and director of labor studies at Hofstra University. She is also completing a book on the civil liberties activism of radical labor organizer Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, and is co-editor of 2 recent anthologies, Talking to the Girls, Intimate and Political Essays on the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire, New Village Press, 2022, and Where Are the Workers? Labor Stories at Museums and Historical Sites, University of Illinois Press, 2020. She holds a PhD from the University of Maryland, a master's from Emerson College, and a bachelor's degree from Providence College. And now, I am thrilled to present the 2024 New York State Workers' Compensation Board Frances Perkins Award to the Remember the Triangle Fire Coalition. Everyone, please help me give a warm welcome and a much-deserved round of applause. Grab your award. Where do we look? What camera?
And this is the clicker, right? Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here. I'd like to say thank you with deep gratitude to the New York State Workers' Compensation Board and to Board Chair Clarissa Rodriguez for recognizing the work of Remember the Triangle Fire Coalition with the Frances Perkins Award. Also to Missy Stewart for all your hard work in organizing this and in working with us to make sure that we got here, got a parking space, got fed, got in. Thank you. That's the important work that sometimes gets overlooked but is so essential. And to everyone else who helped to put this on, including all of the staff working here today. Thank you so much. I am honored to accept this award on behalf of the coalition, and I would be remiss if I did not give a shout out to Joel Szynski, one of the founding members of the coalition, and our recording secretary, and to Andy Sosin, not just Joel's wife, but an active member of the coalition since the beginning, and the co-editor of this beautiful volume, this commemorative book about the Triangle Memorial, of which there are several copies out at the registration desk. If you would like to take one, please do. It tells the story a little bit about the fire, but mostly about the memorial and the support of those who got it built. And Andy, along with Rob Linnae, did an incredible job with it. It's beautiful, and I encourage you to take one. Clarissa, I was really moved by the parallel you drew between your life as the daughter of an immigrant garment worker and as a garment worker yourself, along with your brother, and the lives of the Triangle workers, which, as you noted, were cut short by a terrible and entirely preventable tragedy in 1911. Like you, I'm the daughter of a garment worker. My mom worked in a dress factory in Pittston, Pennsylvania. I'm also the granddaughter of a garment worker. My maternal grandmother worked in a pants factory, also in Pittston, Pennsylvania. Both of them were members of the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, the union that had tried to organize triangle workers before the fire, an effort that was thwarted by the fiercely anti-union owners of the Triangle factory, Max Blank and Isaac Harris. The Triangle story was important to my mom. I'm guessing she learned about it through the ILGWU's political education program. It freed her and her fellow workers from the fear of being killed on the job. And I know this because she told me, point blank. And this is a verbatim quote. "We knew that we were safe in our factory because of what had happened to those poor girls at Triangle." It's a shame that young women like my mother at the time had to be concerned about safety in the workplace. And it's an even greater shame that young women like Anna Altman, Rosie Grasso, Isabella Tortorelli, Sadie Nussbaum, and Annie Nicholas, all of whom were teenagers, by the way, and to name just a few of those who were killed in the Triangle Fire, had to die so that my mother and my grandmother, and you and your mother and brother could feel safe at work. So that all of us could feel safe at work and wherever we go in public, not just here in New York, but all around the US. But that is the legacy of Triangle. It is an awful tragedy that destroyed lives, wreaked havoc upon families and communities, saddened and infuriated workers, horrified and embarrassed politicians, and steeled the determination of good people, people like Frances Perkins, for whom this award is named, to do what they could to ensure that nothing like it ever happened again. These two elements, the tragic loss of so many young lives in a system that valued profit over people, and the steely determination of those who bore witness to that tragedy to change the system for the better, are what make Triangle such a compelling story. Remember, the Triangle Fire Coalition, an all-volunteer 501c3 organization, was founded in 2008 to connect people with that story and explore its continuing relevance. At our founding, we committed ourselves to two main goals. The first was to join with Workers United, SEIU, and other unions, along with the New York City Central Labor Council, FDNY, NICOSH, the American Society for Safety Professionals, faith and community organizations, and others to plan the centennial commemoration service at the site of the fire. The fire happened, in case you do not know, in a building called at the time the Ash Building, now the Brown Building and NYU Science Building, just a block east of Washington Square Park in Greenwich Village. So we worked with these organizations to plan the site commemoration and other events to mark that occasion. And these are posters. On the left is the poster, and then on the right, you see a young Clara Lemlich, who was a leader of a strike of garment workers right before the fire that was actually inspired by an incident at Triangle. I've got something to say. The male workers at Cooper Union wouldn't let her talk. She finally claimed the podium, and her words inspired a general strike. Triangle workers were among the few who were not victorious in that strike. They did not get a union, they did not get workplace safety, and they paid with it for their lives. Above Clara Lemlich is another fierce labor organizer named Kalpona Akhter. You may have heard about the workplace tragedies in Bangladesh, the Rana Plaza fire and the Tazreen factory fire and the Rana Plaza factory collapse. Kalpona has been instrumental in publicizing those events and in organizing workers. She herself was a teenage garment worker, both in her home country and around the world. And we thought that they deserved to be paired, and Kalpona indeed participated in the centennial commemoration. The coalition was the central node of a network of artists, activists, educators, and others around the city, the state, the country, and the world, sharing information and bringing people together in collaborations around this event. Some of the things we organized here in New York City: a procession of handmade shirtwaists, 146 of them each, which there's a sash with the name and the age of someone who died in the fire from Union Square to the building. And I'm really happy to say that the girl on the right is my daughter, who participated in that. She's 27 now and continues the tradition of being active in the garment industry. She works at Louis Vuitton, so kind of a step up, but from a garment factory in Pittston, PA. But it's still in the family. We also You can see the FDNY ladder raised up to the 9th floor. Think of that image when I show you the memorial in a few minutes. That was also part of the ceremony. It's really moving. If you've never come, or if you have come, you remember. I've done this so many times and it still brings tears to my eyes. That's the 9th floor. The fire happened on the 8th, 9th, and 10th floors. The 9th floor is the floor from which over 60 workers, again, mostly young women, jumped to their deaths in front of horrified bystanders, including among them Frances Perkins. So we called out the name of every worker who died, and it was family members, young children, and anyone really who felt a connection and wanted to do so, and laid flowers in front of the building to remember and honor that worker. And each year when we do the annual commemoration, we read those names again, and we also read the names of workers who died more recently in usually preventable workplace accidents in New York and again around the world. And then we also rang the bells around New York City at the time of the fire, about 4:45. It was a very mournful call to memory. And immediately after that, we set to work on our second goal, and that was to build a permanent memorial on the building. This one took a little longer, but it's finally done. It's New York City's, as you heard, first labor memorial. New York City calls itself a union town, and it took until 2023 to actually have a memorial to workers in New York, but we've got one, and it's one of only a small number of memorials in New York to women. And I don't know how many memorials there are to immigrant working class women, but certainly that number around the US and probably around the world is small, and ours is one of them, and we're very, very proud of that. This was a really interesting public-private commemoration because the Brown Building is a New York City cultural landmark. It's the second cultural landmark in New York. Anybody guess what the first is? I'm an educator, so I gotta ask you. Anybody know, can guess what the first cultural landmark in New York City is? Anything? No, Stonewall. Yeah, so it's not an architectural memorial, it's a cultural memorial. That means that New York City recognizes that what happened in that building is significant to the cultural and political history of the city. So first was Stonewall, second was the Brown Building. So because it's an NYU building now, we had to work very closely with the university, which was a delicate and interesting task. And in 2012, we signed an agreement with New York that allowed us to have a memorial on their building and specified what parts of the building were in play. And if any of you are affiliated with universities, you know they are in many ways still medieval institutions. They move really, really slowly. It took a while. Joel and I had many meetings with them. And others had asked, family members, NYU faculty, had tried to get this done, and they were not able to. And I think it was the success of the coalition's work around the centennial that inspired the confidence of NYU. So we signed that agreement in 2012. In 2013, we launched a design competition, and that was led by Ernesto Martinez, who came up from Austin, Texas. He's trained as an architect, to organize the competition. I'm happy to say that we received over 170 entries from more than 30 countries, but interestingly, the winning team was from New York, actually from the best borough in New York, Queens. Richard, I just happen to be from there, but it really is the best borough. Sorry, Brooklyn. Richard Juniu and Uri Wegman, a two-person design team, submitted the winning entry. We then had the hard work of getting this project from an idea to an actual physical memorial on the building. We required the approval of New York City Community Board. Any of you from New York know it's a really interesting thing to work with community boards. Yay, democracy. And we did get the approval from Community Board 2. We actually turned a decision against us where they wanted us to actually dismantle this memorial because they didn't like what it would do to the neighborhood, into a 38-1 decision in favor of the memorial on the building. We then got the approval of the Landmarks Preservation Commission, and that was fabulous. It was a unanimous yes, and they said to us at the end of the meeting, thank you. We really learned something from you. We know now that architecture doesn't speak for itself, that some Some buildings need help telling their story, and we really think what you're doing will help this building tell its story. Of course, then we had to deal with raising money for a memorial. It is not easy to raise money for a labor project. A number of entities initially reached out to us and thought they wanted to give money. And what often happens was, they would consider the full implications of giving money to a labor project. Perhaps their own labor practices would come under scrutiny. And many of them then subsequently backed off. But a number of really good people and organizations did not back off. New York State was our first major funder, to the tune of $1.5 million. There was an article in the New York Times in 2015 by labor reporter Steve Greenhouse that covered the project and said that we were looking for funds. Then Governor Mario Cuomo wishful thinking, Andrew Cuomo saw the article and offered to fund the memorial fully and issued us a $1.5 million grant. The other entities, labor unions, Workers United, SEIU, which, by the way, Workers United is the Starbucks Workers Union now, but it traces its roots back to the International Ladies Garment Workers Union. So they funded the memorial. The Hillman Foundation, which is a labor-affiliated journalism foundation, the Firefighters Union, some fashion organizations, Eileen Fisher, the Council of Fashion Designers of America, and then some foundations, the Puffin Foundation, the Giambelli Foundation, and a number of big-hearted individuals, and we were able to raise the $3 million that we needed to get this built. And you might be asking me, hey, Marianne, why did the state give you 1.5 if you needed 3? Well, we learned during COVID, when the project paused, that the way we had intended to attach the memorial to the building was not going to work, because buildings built at the turn of the last century, there were no codes governing them. Everybody did kind of what they thought would work. And so we were going to attach the memorial to the building, and we realized when we did some tests on it that when you pulled the brick facade back, there was air behind the building, so we actually had to probe to find the steel. And so that meant extra money. And so our other donors stepped up and provided that extra money. We also had the support from elected officials, Gail Brewer, Manhattan Borough President at the time, State Rep Brad Hoylman, and others like him really stepped up for this project. And as I said, this was delayed by COVID, like just about everything else, but that pause allowed us to do the things we needed to do, engineering-wise, to make sure that the project was safe when it was installed on the building. And as you can see here, the dedication was October 11th, 2023. So what is this memorial? Well, essentially, if you see on the left, that's an image from 1911. And you see the hoses going up to the 9th floor, and you see the signage on the corner of the building to advertise Triangle on the top 3 floors and all the other enterprises in that building. It was very common when loft buildings had lots of businesses within them. And that was kind of the evil thing about this, right? People walked past this building every day, and because it didn't look like a factory, they could convince themselves that it wasn't a factory, and they didn't have to care about what was going on inside until the fire and the bodies started spilling out of that window, and they couldn't ignore it anymore. So what we did was we kind of riffed on some of those things. And Richard and Uri designed a memorial that is essentially a steel ribbon. And I'll show you some close-up images in a minute that cascades down from the 9th floor at the corner of Washington and Green. Again, the 9th floor where over 60 workers jumped to their deaths. Workers on the 10th floor mostly survived. Workers on the 8th floor, most of them were able to get out because that's where the fire started. And the 10th floor is where the bosses were, and they got a call to evacuate, and they did across the roof. So it was that 9th floor. So we wanted to honor that and draw people's eyes up to that. The ribbon cascades down the side, and then it splits at about 12 feet above the ground. And you can see that's the corner where it splits. You might notice that there's some etching on that ribbon. In 2017, we invited people from New York and around the country and around the world to submit pieces of fabric if they felt connected to this story, and they did. And we held a big sewing event at FIT and at Hofstra and at a few other places, and we sewed what is called a collective ribbon. And then the pattern from that ribbon was etched onto the steel so that it really does look like cloth cast in steel. So that cascades down, it splits about 12 feet above the ground, and then the names are stenciled into those panels about 12 feet above the ground. So that steel draws your eyes upward, and then you see the names, and I want to add that these names were lovingly rendered. They were lovingly gathered by two of our board members, Suzanne Pred-Bass, who is related to two family members who died in the fire. One, Katie Weiner, who survived, and Rosie Weiner, who died, her two great aunts, and Lois Pascali, aka Lulu Lolo, who holds these workers to her heart. I worked with them. They painstakingly went through records and even worked with a historian in Italy to get birth certificates for the Italians, to make sure that the names that we put in steel were as accurate as possible. Because you can put names on a website and change them, but you can't change steel. We also worked with family members. If there was a nickname for a worker or something, we wanted that to be acknowledged. There were 6 or 7 pairs of sisters. Was it 6 or 7? Do you remember? At least 6, maybe 7 pairs of sisters who died in fire. We wanted that to be evident. So for workers who married, since 2/3 of, most of these workers were women, 2/3 Jewish, 1/3 Italian. If you married, we used your first name, birth name, last name, so that people could see the family members who had died. And we also included the ages. These ages were included to tell the story that some of these workers were 14. The oldest, I believe, was in her early 40s, I think 43. The font for this, by the way, was designed by a woman. We felt very strongly that we wanted a woman-designed font. We wanted this memorial to have a story as rich as it could possibly be. So the collection of the names and the font. And let me just tell you something. Until you've spent an hour arguing over whether a dot on an I should be round or square, you have not lived. And then in the end, we didn't dot the I's anyway. But you could see the care that we put into this. So it tells the story of the fire and the names and ages of the workers who died. So this is that bottom panel. It's a stone glass. It's a material that comes from Parma, Italy, and it reflects those names you saw stenciled in the panel. So it drops down, splits, comes like this. The names are stenciled here, then you go down here, and the panels on either side, English, story of the fire, on the Washington Place side, and then around the corner, on the Green Street side, it tells the story of the fire in Italian and Yiddish, languages to honor the ethnicities of most of the workers there. And to the best of our knowledge, it is the only trilingual memorial in the US, and probably the only one with Yiddish and Italian on it. So it tells the story of the fire and how it inspired movements for worker rights and workplace safety. And you can see the names reflected as well as eyewitness testimony from both workers, all of whose jobs are listed, and Frances Perkins and William Gunn Shepherd, a AP reporter who saw the fire. And this is the dedication ceremony. The gentleman in the wheelchair is former state Senator Surf Maltese, who lost all of the women in his family that day in the fire. His grandmother and his 2 aunts, the Maltese sisters and their mom, were killed in the fire. And you see those flowers. So it's interesting. The reflecting panel is like this. So like you see this thing on the building, right? And you're like, oh, what's that? And then you walk up and you see it goes really way up high, and you think, oh, what is this? And then you see these names, and you're trying to figure out what's going on. And then you look, and you see the names reflected on this stone glass panel and the age, and then you start noticing that there's like writing on it too, and you're reading this eyewitness testimony, and you start walking along Washington Place, and then you turn the corner on Green Street, right? And it's beautiful and it's wonderful, so it involves your whole body, and you're kind of like a spectator in 1911, because you're looking up and then looking down, which is what they did, looking up, begging the workers not to jump, looking down as they jumped to their deaths on the sidewalk, right? And you see those flowers, and there are these little clamps on the side of the memorial that were there actually to prevent skateboarders from grinding on it. My 2 sons, who are both skaters, were the ones who helped us to design something to keep skateboarders off, but they also hold flowers. So you can see that on the day of the dedication, and every year on the annual commemoration ceremony, we instead of laying the flowers on the floor now, we put them there. We're also now working on an app, a QR code, to provide more historical context and context about the memorial. And there you can see a little bit more closely. Okay, so the coalition is now pondering our next project. If you have any ideas, let me know. While we do, the memorial is doing its work. People in the neighborhood visited, tourists visited, students visited, workers, union organizers, and Kalpona Actor, the woman who was on the poster that I showed you from 2011, came to New York City to stand in front of that memorial to honor the workers at Triangle and to say, I wish we did this in Bangladesh. We need to remember our dead from Rana Plaza, Tazreen, and too many other workplace accidents. And if that wasn't enough proof that this is something that people are really noticing, we were a question on Jeopardy just a few months ago. And I'm like talking not the fire, the memorial. There was a category monuments and memorials, and there was a picture of the memorial, and they said, in what neighborhood in New York City is the monument recently dedicated to workers who died in the Triangle Fire located? And I'm sad to say no one knew Greenwich Village, but the important point is that we were there. This is now something that people notice and that people regard as important. And I don't know if you know, like about a year ago, they were asking young men, what thing do you think about? What kinds of things do you find on your mind? And men said the Roman Empire. Young men, oddly enough, who have no connection in their day-to-day lives, think about the Roman Empire like an unusual amount of times a day. And when they asked women, what do you think about? The number one answer was the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. So I think everyone should visit this. We're facing growing threats against the good things this tragedy inspired and the good work that people like Frances Perkins did. The NLRB is under attack. Social Security is being threatened with privatization. The prohibitions against the exploitation of children working are being eroded in states around the US. There are campaigns to vilify immigrants and to bust unions. These developments make the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire and the memorial more relevant than ever. Like they did over 100 years ago, government leaders and ordinary people have the power to fight back against those threats. Our dream is for the Triangle Memorial to inspire whoever visits it to join that fight and to stay with that fight until we build the kind of work that we want and we deserve. So please visit, please join us in that fight. Thank you.